Have you ever seen pure hatred in someone's eyes? I mean the kind that makes ice feel warm? I have. It was Christmas Eve 2024, as the crystal pitcher's water streamed down my face, dripping onto my grandmother's vintage pearl necklace. The same necklace that just caused my mother-in-law to snap in front of 20 stunned family members. But let me tell you, that water wasn't nearly as cold as Eleanor Montgomery's voice when she hissed, "You don't deserve to wear my mother's pearls. You gold-digging little thief." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Funny thing is, 6 months ago, I thought family heirlooms were just pretty trinkets that gathered dust. Now I know better. They're weapons, loaded with generations of expectations, pride, and power. And in the wrong hands, they can tear a family apart. Every pearl on that necklace carries a story, but none quite as devastating as mine. The crystal pitcher now lies in pieces on the antique Persian rug, just like the family it was meant to serve. The water has soaked through my silk dress, but I stand tall, my fingers clutching those precious pearls. 20 pairs of eyes dart between Eleanor and me, waiting to see who'll make the next move in this twisted game of family chess. If only they knew this was just the culmination of a war that had been brewing since the day I first set foot in the Montgomery mansion. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Olivia Chen, and until last year, my life was almost picture perfect. At 28, I had built a thriving career as a museum curator specializing in historical jewelry and artifacts. My tiny office at the Metropolitan Museum of Art was my sanctuary, filled with catalogs of priceless gems and ancient treasures. The irony of what was to come still makes me laugh, bitterly. Every morning, I would climb the grand steps of the Met, coffee in hand, ready to lose myself in the stories behind each piece in our collection. My colleagues used to joke that I spent more time with dead people's jewelry than with living people. They weren't entirely wrong. Each artifact had a story to tell, a mystery to unravel. Little did I know I was about to become entangled in the most complex mystery of all, the Montgomery family legacy. I met Nathan Montgomery on a rainy Tuesday in October. The museum was hosting a fundraiser, one of those black tie affairs where wealthy donors pretended to care about art while really just networking. I was stationed near the Victorian jewelry exhibit, mentally counting down the minutes until I could kick off my uncomfortable heels. That's when I spotted him. Tall, slightly disheveled, with wire-rimmed glasses that kept sliding down his nose. While others were busy name-dropping and champagne sipping, he was genuinely fascinated by a display of Victorian mourning jewelry. "The hair belonged to the deceased loved ones," I said, making him jump. "They would weave it into intricate patterns and set it in gold or jet. It was considered the most intimate way to remember someone, carrying a piece of them close to your heart." He turned, pushing those adorable glasses back up. "That's both romantic and slightly creepy," he grinned. "I'm Nathan. And please tell me you're not about to ask me to donate my hair for future jewelry-making purposes." His joke caught me off guard, and I found myself laughing genuinely for the first time that evening. "Olivia," I replied. "And no, your hair is safe, although—" I pretended to study his dark curls critically. "It would make a lovely watch chain." What followed was 2 hours of conversation that flew by in what felt like minutes. Nathan was a history professor at Columbia, specializing in American Revolutionary War economics. He shared my passion for the past, though his expertise lay in ledgers and letters rather than gems and jewelry. We debated historical theories, swapped strange facts about our respective fields, and somehow ended up discussing whether Hamilton would have been into NFTs. That night turned into coffee at a tiny cafe in the West Village, which turned into dinner at his favorite hole-in-the-wall Vietnamese place, which turned into weekend trips to obscure historical sites. Nathan was brilliant, kind, and refreshingly down-to-earth despite coming from old money. He never name-dropped his family connections or flaunted his background. In fact, it took me 3 months to realize that the Montgomerys he occasionally mentioned were the Montgomerys, one of New York's oldest and most influential families. We married in a simple ceremony at the Conservatory Garden in Central Park, surrounded by blooming spring flowers and close friends. I wore a vintage 1920s dress I'd found in a Brooklyn boutique, and Nathan surprised me with a pair of Art Deco earrings he'd discovered at an antique shop. His father, William, a quiet man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor, welcomed me warmly into the family. He gave a touching speech about love transcending generations and the importance of creating our own traditions. His mother, Eleanor, was polite. That should have been my first warning. The Montgomerys had been fixtures of New York's upper society since the 1800s. Their brownstone on the Upper East Side was like stepping into a time capsule, filled with antiques and family portraits dating back generations. Each room told a story of old money and older secrets. The first time I visited, Eleanor gave me what she called the grand tour, though it felt more like an examination. "This painting," she said, gesturing to a stern-looking woman in Victorian dress, "is Nathan's great-great-grandmother, Victoria Montgomery. She helped establish the family's position in New York society. She understood the importance of maintaining certain standards." The way she emphasized the last word made it clear she was talking about more than just social etiquette. But the true centerpiece of their collection was a strand of perfectly matched South Sea pearls, each one the size of a small grape, with a distinctive sapphire and diamond clasp. They sat in a custom-made display case in Eleanor's private sitting room, illuminated like a museum piece. "They belong to my grandmother, Beatrice Montgomery," Eleanor told me, her voice dripping with practiced refinement. "She wore them when she was presented at court to King George V. They've been passed down to every Montgomery bride since then." Her fingers traced the glass case possessively. "Of course, only those who truly understand their significance have been worthy of wearing them." I nodded appreciatively, my curator's eye noting the exceptional quality of the pearls. The clasp alone was a masterpiece of Art Deco craftsmanship, likely from Cartier's workshop in the 1920s. What I didn't notice then was the way Eleanor's fingers tightened around her wine glass when I admired them, or how her smile never quite reached her eyes when she spoke of family traditions. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after the wedding. Nathan and I bought a cozy apartment in Park Slope, Brooklyn, far enough from the Upper East Side to have our own space, but close enough for family obligations. I continued my work at the Met, and Nathan's research was gaining recognition in academic circles. We hosted dinner parties where conversation flowed as freely as wine, and our friends joked about how we were disgustingly perfect together. Then came the letter from Nathan's grandmother, Beatrice. It arrived on a crisp October morning just as the leaves in Prospect Park were turning golden. The envelope was thick, cream-colored paper with Beatrice's shaky handwriting. Nathan was at a conference in Boston, so I set it aside for his return. But Eleanor called that afternoon, her voice carrying through my phone with an urgency that made me uneasy. "Nathan mentioned a letter arrived from his grandmother," she said, her voice tight with barely concealed tension. "What did it say?" I told her I hadn't opened it, as it was addressed to Nathan. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken words. "Of course," Eleanor said finally. "Do let me know when he reads it. Family correspondence is important to us." The way she emphasized family made it clear where I stood in her hierarchy. I remember standing in our kitchen after that call, sunlight streaming through the windows, casting shadows on the granite countertops Nathan had insisted on installing. Something in Eleanor's voice had set off warning bells in my mind, but I pushed the feeling aside. After all, what harm could a letter from a sweet old lady possibly cause? Oh, how naive I was. When Nathan returned 3 days later, we sat on our balcony with glasses of wine as he opened the letter. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I watched his face change as he read. Surprise, then confusion, then something like worry creasing his brow. "What is it?" I asked, setting down my glass. He looked up at me, then back at the letter. "Grandma Beatrice wants to meet you. Specifically you. And—" He paused, running a hand through his dark hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign of stress. "She wants to discuss the pearls." The autumn wind picked up then, sending fallen leaves skittering across our balcony. Looking back now, it feels like nature itself was trying to warn me of the storm that was about to break. The drive to Beatrice Montgomery's estate in Connecticut felt longer than its actual 2 hours. Nathan kept fiddling with the radio, a nervous habit I'd never seen before. The letter sat between us on the console, its contents now seared into my memory. "Bring the curator," it had said, not even using my name. It's time she learned about the pearl's true history. The way Beatrice had written curator made it sound like an accusation rather than a profession. Rain pelted the windshield as we turned onto a private drive lined with ancient maple trees. Their branches, heavy with autumn leaves, created a canopy that seemed to swallow us whole. The house appeared through the gray curtain of rain, a sprawling Victorian mansion with a widow's walk and more chimneys than I could count. "Grands, never invited anyone here since Grandpa died," Nathan muttered, pulling up to the circular driveway. "She barely even lets Mom visit." An elderly woman in a crisp black uniform opened the massive front door before we could ring the bell. "Mr. Nathan?" She nodded, then turned her sharp eyes to me. "And you must be the curator. Mrs. Beatrice is waiting in the library." The way she said curator matched Beatrice's letter perfectly. I was beginning to feel like my profession was some sort of secret code I didn't understand. The library was a 2-story affair that would have made any bibliophile weep with joy. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with leather-bound books reached toward an ornate coffered ceiling. But my attention was immediately drawn to the woman seated in a high-backed leather chair near a crackling fireplace. Beatrice Montgomery might have been in her 80s, but she sat with the posture of a queen holding court. "You're late," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. Her voice was stronger than I'd expected, carrying the weight of authority that comes from decades of being. Obeyed without question. "Nathan, pour us some tea, Earl Grey, and then leave us." Nathan opened his mouth as if to protest, but one look from his grandmother silenced him. I watched him retreat to a side table where a silver tea service waited. Beatrice's eyes never left me as Nathan prepared the tea. They were the same shade of steel gray as Eleanor's, but where her daughter-in-law's gaze was cold with disdain, Beatrice's held something else. Calculation, perhaps, or evaluation. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing to the chair opposite hers. Nathan handed us each a delicate teacup, squeezed my shoulder reassuringly, and left, closing the heavy library doors behind him. "So," Beatrice said after a long moment of silence, "you're the one who thinks she can authenticate my mother's pearls." I nearly choked on my tea. "I'm sorry," I managed, but she waved away my confusion. "Don't play coy, girl. Eleanor told me about your little examination of the necklace, how you claimed to know its origins, its maker." She set down her cup with a sharp clink. "What else do you think you know about my family's legacy?" The accusation in her tone made my professional pride flare. "With all due respect, Mrs. Montgomery, I wasn't examining anything. I simply noticed the distinctive style of the clasp, which is clearly from Cartier's workshop during the Art Deco period. It's my job to know these things." I took a deliberate sip of tea, fighting to keep my hand steady. "And I never claimed to know anything about your family's legacy." A sound that might have been a laugh escaped her. "Cartier's workshop? Is that what you think?" She reached for a leather-bound book on the table beside her. "Tell me, curator, what do you know about Catherine the Great's lost pearl collection? The sudden change in topic threw me off balance. I searched my memory for the famous historical mystery. It disappeared during the Russian Revolution, I said slowly. Some say the Bolsheviks sold it. Others claim one of the imperial families. Ladies-in-waiting smuggled it out. There are dozens of theories, but no one knows for sure. I paused, something tickling at the edge of my professional memory. The most distinctive piece was supposedly a strand of perfectly matched South Sea pearls with a... My voice trailed off as realization hit. With a sapphire and diamond clasp. Beatrice's thin lips curved into something between a smile and a grimace. Now you begin to understand. The story Eleanor knows, the one about my mother being presented at court, is what we tell outsiders. The truth is far more interesting and far more dangerous. She opened the leather book, revealing not pages but a hidden compartment containing yellowed letters and photographs. My grandmother was that lady-in-waiting, Beatrice continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. She didn't just smuggle out the necklace. She had help from within the Bolshevik ranks, a young revolutionary who fell in love with her and helped her escape to America. They married, changed their name to Montgomery, and built a new life here in New York. Those pearls bought this house, established our family's position in society. My curator's mind was racing with the historical implications, but Beatrice wasn't finished. Eleanor thinks those pearls are her birthright, that they represent our family's social standing. She has no idea they represent something far more valuable, survival at any cost. She fixed me with those steel gray eyes. But you, with your expert's eye and your questions, you could expose everything. I sat back in my chair, my tea forgotten. Mrs. Montgomery, I would never... She cut me off with a sharp gesture. Intentions are irrelevant. Knowledge itself is dangerous. Eleanor already suspects something isn't quite what it seems. She's been pressing me to hand over the necklace. Before I die, to keep it in the direct family line, as she puts it. The rain had grown heavier outside, drumming against the library's tall windows. In the firelight, Beatrice suddenly looked every one of her 80-plus years. I called you. Here because I need to know if you can be trusted with this secret. Those pearls aren't just jewelry. They're proof of a history that could still have consequences today. There are still people in Russia who would love to prove their lost treasures ended up in American hands. Lightning flashed outside, casting dramatic shadows across the room. Why tell me this? I asked. Why not take the secret to your grave? Beatrice's laugh was bitter this time. Because, my dear curator, I've seen how Eleanor treats you. I recognize the look in her eyes, the same look the Bolsheviks had when they came for the imperial family's treasures. Greed masked as righteousness. And I've seen how you look at Nathan, the same way my grandmother looked at that young revolutionary who saved her life. She leaned forward, her voice urgent. I'm dying, Olivia. Cancer. I have months at most. And I need someone who understands both the historical value and the human cost of secrets to protect those pearls after I'm gone. Someone who won't be blinded by their supposed monetary worth or their social significance. She pulled something else from the hidden compartment, a small key on a black ribbon. The question is, are you willing to bear that burden? The weight of history, of secrets, of family legacy seemed to press down on me as I stared at that key. Outside, thunder rolled across the Connecticut countryside like artillery fire from a long-ago revolution. I reached for the key, my hand trembling slightly, not yet knowing that this moment would set in motion events that would lead to that water-soaked Christmas Eve and the shattering of more than just a crystal pitcher. The drive back to Brooklyn was silent, the key from Beatrice feeling like a lead weight in my coat pocket. Nathan tried making conversation a few times, but my monosyllabic responses eventually led him to give up. How could I tell him that his family's entire legacy was built on smuggled Russian imperial treasures? That his grandmother had just made me the keeper of a secret that could destroy everything the Montgomerys had built? My phone buzzed repeatedly. Eleanor, no doubt wondering what her mother-in-law had revealed. I let each call go to voicemail, watching the notification numbers climb. By the time we reached Park Slope, I had 7 missed calls and 13 text messages. The last one simply read, "We need to talk. Now." I showed it to Nathan, who sighed and ran his hands through his hair. "Maybe we should invite her over. Clear the air?" Before I could respond, another text came through. "I'm outside your building." Nathan and I exchanged looks of surprise as we pulled up to see Eleanor's Mercedes parked in our spot, her rigid silhouette visible through the windshield. She stepped out as we approached, her Burberry trench coat immaculate despite the rain. "4 hours," she said by way of greeting. "You spent 4 hours with Beatrice. What exactly did you discuss?" I felt Nathan tense beside me. "Mom, it's late. Can't this wait until tomorrow?" Eleanor's eyes never left my face. "No, Alexander. It cannot wait. Your grandmother has been acting erratically lately, making strange decisions. As the family's primary heir, I need to ensure she hasn't done anything impulsive." The way she emphasized impulsive made it clear she knew something was afoot. We ended up in our living room, Eleanor perched on the edge of our sofa like a bird of prey ready to strike. I busied myself making coffee, grateful for the excuse to keep my hands occupied. The key in my pocket seemed to burn against my leg. "Beatrice showed me some old family photographs," I said carefully, setting down the coffee cups. "We mostly discussed jewelry history. She was curious about my expertise." "Really?" Eleanor's voice could have frosted the windows. "And I suppose that's why she gave you something before you left. I saw you pocket it through the library window." My hand instinctively went to my coat, and I cursed myself for the telling gesture. Eleanor's eyes gleamed with triumph. "What did she give you, Claire? What claim has she decided to grant you over my family's heritage?" Nathan stepped in, his voice carrying an authority I'd never heard before. "That's enough, Mom. If Gran wanted to share something with Olivia, that's her right. This isn't an interrogation." But Eleanor was already standing, her coffee untouched. "Oh, but it is, Alexander. Your grandmother is unwell. Surely you've noticed. Her mind isn't what it used to be. Any decision she makes now could be questioned, legally speaking." The threat in her words was clear. I thought of Beatrice's story, of her grandmother's desperate escape from Russia, of the sacrifices made to build this family's future. "Mrs. Montgomery," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I understand you're concerned, but I'm not your enemy. I'm a historian, a curator. My job is to preserve history, not destroy it." "Preserve history?" Eleanor laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. "You're a collector of other people's legacies, displaying them in glass cases for strangers to gawk at. Our family's heritage isn't some museum piece to be cataloged and studied. It's alive, it's sacred, and it belongs to those who've earned it through blood and sacrifice." If she only knew how literally true those words were. I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the window. 3 women locked in a battle over history none of us fully understood. Well, 2 of us didn't understand. I felt the weight of Beatrice's trust pressing down on me along with that key. "You're right," I said, softly. "Family heritage is sacred. That's exactly why Beatrice wanted to speak with me. She wanted to ensure that heritage would be protected, not just possessed." Eleanor's face flushed. "Protected? From whom? From me? I've spent my entire life upholding the Montgomery name while you've been playing with trinkets in your museum basement." She turned to Nathan. "Alexander, surely you can see what's happening here. First, she insinuates herself into our family, and now she's trying to drive a wedge between us and your grandmother's affections." "That's not what's happening, Mom," Nathan started, but Eleanor was already reaching for her coat. "I see I'm wasting. My time here tonight. But make no mistake, this isn't over. Whatever Beatrice gave you, whatever she told you, remember that you're an outsider. You'll always be an outsider. She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. And outsiders who threaten the Montgomery family tend to regret it. After she left, Nathan poured us both a generous glass of whiskey. I'm sorry about her, he said, sinking into the couch. She gets intense about family matters, especially anything involving Grand's decisions. I took a long sip, letting the alcohol burn away some of my tension. Nathan, I said carefully, what do you know about your great-great-grandmother, the one who first came to America? He shrugged. Not much. She was Russian nobility who fled during the revolution. Made a new life here. Why? I studied my glass, watching the whiskey catch the light. Do you ever wonder what she brought with her? What she left behind? Nathan gave me a curious look. Olivia, what exactly did Gran tell you today? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed, with a text from an unknown number. The message made my blood run cold. The Romanov pearls were stolen, not saved. Return them, or the truth comes out. Attached was a photo, grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. A young woman in revolutionary uniform standing next to Beatrice's grandmother, the same sapphire and diamond clasp glinting at her throat. Nathan noticed my expression. What is it? What's wrong? I locked my phone screen, my mind racing. Nothing, I lied, forcing a smile. Just work stuff. But as I lay awake that night, listening to Nathan's steady breathing beside me, I realized Beatrice had been right. Knowledge was dangerous. And now that danger wasn't just from within the family, it was reaching across a century of secrets, all the way from Russia to our Brooklyn brownstone, the key pressed against my ribs from its hiding place in my nightgown's inner pocket. Tomorrow, I would need to visit Beatrice again, because if someone else knew the truth about those pearls, then Eleanor's threats were the least of my problems. The real question was, who else had been guarding this secret for 100 years, waiting for their chance to reclaim a lost piece of imperial history? Morning found me in the Met's archives, surrounded by stacks of books on the Russian Revolution. I'd called in sick to work, but couldn't resist using my access to the museum's resources. The mysterious text kept playing in my mind. Someone else knew about the pearl's true origin, and they had proof. But who? And why reach out now, after all these years? My phone buzzed, another text from the unknown number. Time is running out. The truth for the necklace? Or should we ask Eleanor about her family's real history? I gripped the edge of my desk, trying to steady my breathing. Involving Eleanor would be catastrophic. She'd burn down the whole family legacy before admitting it was built on stolen treasures. A knock on the archive door made me jump. Ms. Chen? It was Marcus, one of our security guards. There's someone here to see you, says it's urgent. I followed him upstairs to find a tall man in an impeccable suit waiting in the lobby. His accent was subtle, but distinctly Russian. Ms. Chen, I represent certain interested parties in St. Petersburg. May we speak privately? I led him to the museum's cafe, choosing a corner table away from the morning crowd. He introduced himself as Viktor Petrov, a cultural heritage consultant. The way he said it made it clear that was not his real profession. The Romanov collection has many missing pieces, he said, stirring his espresso. Most are lost forever, but some... His eyes met mine. Some have very interesting stories to tell. I'm not sure what this has to do with me, I said, keeping my voice neutral. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. No? Then perhaps we should discuss it with the Montgomery family? I understand you're quite close with them now. He pulled out his phone, showing me the same photograph I'd received last night. This young revolutionary? Her name was Anya Volkova. She disappeared in 1918, along with several imperial treasures. including a rather famous pearl necklace. My curatorial instincts kicked in. Anya Volkova, I repeated. The same Anya who later married James Montgomery? Victor's eyebrows rose slightly. Ah, so Beatrice has been sharing family secrets. Tell me, did she mention that Anya wasn't just any revolutionary? She was part of a specialized unit tasked with cataloging seized imperial property. She didn't just steal the necklace, she betrayed her comrades, her cause. The implications hit me like a physical blow. The Montgomery fortune wasn't just built on stolen jewelry, it was built on betrayal. What do you want? I asked, although I already knew the answer. Victor leaned back, his expression almost sympathetic. The necklace, of course. Return. It to its rightful owners, and this story stays buried. Refuse and, well, he shrugged elegantly. History has a way of coming to light. I need time, I said, to think about this. He stood, adjusting his perfectly tailored suit. You have 3 days, Ms. Chen. After that, we take our story to the press. I imagine the art world would be fascinated to learn that one of their respected curators is helping hide stolen imperial treasures. He laid his card on the table. Do make the right choice. I sat there long after he left, his card burning a hole in my pocket next to Beatrice's key. The cafe had emptied out, the morning rush replaced by the quiet shuffle of museum visitors. My phone buzzed again. Eleanor this time. Family dinner tonight, non-negotiable. Perfect, just what I needed. The Montgomery townhouse was lit up, like a fortress when I arrived that evening. Nathan met me at the door, his face tight with worry. Mom's been acting weird all day, he whispered as he took my coat. She's been making calls, meeting with lawyers. My stomach dropped. Had Victor's interested parties already reached out to her? Eleanor was waiting in the dining room, seated at the head of the table where her father-in-law used to sit. William, Nathan's father, was notably absent. Business trip, Eleanor said curtly when Nathan asked. But something in her tone made me wonder. The whole scene felt staged, like a trap waiting to be sprung. I've been doing some research, Eleanor announced as the first course was served. About museum acquisition policies. Fascinating reading. She took a deliberate sip of wine. Did you know that museums are legally obligated to return stolen artifacts to their rightful owners? Even if those artifacts have been in private hands for generations? My soup spoon froze halfway to my mouth. Mom, Nathan started, but Eleanor continued as if he hadn't spoken. I also learned that museum curators have a professional duty to report suspected stolen artifacts. Failure to do so could end a career. Fascinating ethical dilemma, don't you think, Olivia? Very fascinating, I managed, especially since many artifacts from that era have disputed provenance. The Russian Revolution, for example, created thousands of refugees who fled with family heirlooms. The legal and ethical questions are quite complex. Eleanor's eyes glittered. Are they? I would think stealing is stealing, regardless of the circumstances. She dabbed her lips with her napkin. Of course, sometimes people steal more than just objects. They steal opportunities, positions, influence. They insinuate themselves into established families, trying to appropriate heritage that isn't theirs to claim. The irony of her words was almost painful. If she only knew her own family, had done exactly that, appropriated a heritage that wasn't theirs, built their social position on stolen treasures. But underneath her usual disdain, I sensed something else. Fear? Uncertainty? Did she somehow know about Victor's visit? Heritage is complicated, I said carefully. Sometimes protecting it means understanding its full history, not just the version we want to believe. Eleanor's hand tightened on her wine glass. Is that what Beatrice told you? Some revised version of our history? The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. Mom, Nathan interjected, what exactly are you implying? Before she could answer, my phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number, but this time with a different photo. Not the historical black and white one, but a recent color shot of me meeting Victor at the museum cafe. The message read, "Time's running out. Choose carefully." I looked up to find Eleanor watching me intently, a strange smile playing at her lips, and suddenly I knew she wasn't working against Victor's interested parties. She was working with them. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Eleanor wasn't just fighting against me, she was orchestrating this whole thing. My hands trembled as I excused myself from the dinner table, nearly knocking over my wine, glass in my haste to reach the bathroom. Once inside, I pulled out my phone and dialed Beatrice's number. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting for my call. "They found you, didn't they?" Her voice was thin but steady. "Victor Petrov and his interested parties." I leaned against the marble sink, my reflection pale in the ornate mirror. "You knew they were coming. That's why you told me everything." The soft sound of her laughter crackled through the phone. "My dear, I've known they were coming for 50 years. Why do you think I never gave Eleanor the necklace? She's been working with them for months." The bathroom door rattled. Someone trying to get in. "Just a minute," I called out, then lowered my voice. "But why? Why would Eleanor help people who want to expose her own family's secrets?" Beatrice's response chilled me to the bone. "Because she's not a Montgomery by blood. William isn't her biological father. She found out last year when she needed a medical procedure. She's been planning her revenge ever since." The door rattled again, more insistently this time. "I have to go," I whispered into the phone. "Come to the house tonight," Beatrice replied urgently. "Use the key I gave you. There's more you need to know." The line went dead just as I heard Eleanor's voice outside. "Olivia, is everything all right in there?" I opened the door to find both Eleanor and Nathan waiting. "Sorry," I mumbled. "Not feeling well." Eleanor's smile was predatory. "Perhaps you should go home and rest. We can continue our discussion about heritage another time." The way she emphasized heritage made it clear she knew exactly who I'd been calling. Nathan insisted on driving me home, despite my protests that I could take a cab. As we pulled away from the townhouse, I could see Eleanor watching from the window, phone pressed to her ear. She was reporting to Victor, no doubt. The thought made me sick. "Want to tell me what's really going on?" Nathan asked as we stopped at a red light. "Between you, Gran, and my mother?" I looked at my husband's profile, remembering how we'd met, over Victorian mourning jewelry. How simple everything had seemed then. "Nathan," I said carefully, "what if you found out your family's whole history was different from what you believed? That the stories you grew up with were just cover-ups for something else?" He was quiet for a long moment, the car idling at the intersection. "You mean like the fact that Mom isn't really Dad's daughter?" My head snapped around to stare at him. He gave a bitter laugh. "I overheard them fighting about it last month. Dad's been in Shanghai ever since, supposedly for business. Really, he's just running away from the truth like he always does." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, hurt that he'd kept such a huge secret. He shrugged, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Same reason you haven't told me what Gran really said about the pearls. Some truths are too dangerous to share." He pulled up in front of our building. "I'll stay at my office. Tonight, grade some papers. You should do whatever you need to do." I watched him drive away, realizing that everyone in this family was keeping secrets from everyone else. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so tragic. Checking to make sure I wasn't being followed, I called a cab to take me to Beatrice's estate. The house was dark when I arrived, but I found a note taped to the back door. "Library, hurry." Using the key she'd given me, I made my way through the silent house, my curator's training helping me avoid priceless antiques in the darkness. The library door was ajar, firelight flickering within. Beatrice sat in her usual chair, but something was wrong. Her posture was too still, too rigid. As I approached, my heart stopped. Her eyes were open, staring sightlessly at the ceiling. An empty teacup had fallen from her lifeless fingers, dark liquid staining the Persian carpet. She never could leave. "Well enough alone." Eleanor's voice came from the shadows, making me jump. She stepped into the firelight, holding a familiar strand of pearls. Always had to play the noble guardian of family secrets. Even after she found out William wasn't my father, she kept pretending I was a true Montgomery. She ran the pearls through her fingers, the sapphire clasp catching the light. She didn't even have the decency to tell me herself. I had to find out from a medical form. "What did you do to her?" I whispered, though I already knew. Eleanor's laugh was hollow. The same thing my supposed great-great-grandmother did to her. Revolutionary comrades, what she had to do to protect herself. Though in my case, it was just a matter of the right herbs in her evening tea. Beatrice's precious organic blend made it easy. My hand crept toward my phone, but Eleanor shook her head. "Don't bother calling for help. Victor's men are outside. As far as anyone will know, the poor old lady had a heart attack while meeting with her beloved grandson's wife. So tragic." She stepped closer, the pearls glinting like tears in the firelight. "The only question is, will there be one death tonight, or two?" "Why?" I asked, trying to keep her talking while I looked for a way out. "Why work with the Russians? Why not just expose the family secret yourself?" Eleanor's face twisted with hatred. "Because that wouldn't be enough. This family stole everything, their position, their wealth, their very identity. Just like they stole my chance to know my real father. Now they'll lose it all, piece by piece, starting with their precious pearls." She held up the necklace. "Do you know what these are worth on the black market? Millions. Add in the scandal of their true origin, and the Montgomerys will be ruined. Nathan will learn what it's like to be an outsider, just like I've always been." She smiled, but it was more like a snarl. "And you, my dear curator, will be the perfect scapegoat. The greedy little social climber who killed poor Beatrice trying to steal a family heirloom." My mind raced. The pearls in her hands weren't moving quite right in the firelight. The clasp wasn't catching the light the way it should. And then I remembered something from my earlier meeting with Victor. Something that changed everything. I just prayed I was right, or the next few moments would be my last. I kept my eyes fixed on the pearls in Eleanor's hands, my curator's training screaming at me about what I was seeing. "Those aren't the real ones, are they?" I said softly. "Beatrice never kept them here. That's what Victor's meeting was really about. He was testing me, seeing if I knew where the real necklace was hidden." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the strand. "What are you talking about? These are the Romanov pearls." But I could hear the uncertainty creeping into her voice. I took a careful step forward, my heart pounding. "No, they're not. The real clasp has a tiny flaw in the sapphire, a natural inclusion that looks like a crescent moon. Every expert knows that detail. These pearls are good replicas, but they're just that, replicas." "You're lying," Eleanor snarled, but she was examining the clasp now, holding it closer to the firelight. I pressed my advantage. Beatrice knew someone would come for them eventually. She kept copies in plain sight while hiding the real ones somewhere else. That's why she gave me the key, not for the display case, but for wherever she actually kept them. A new voice joined our conversation. "Very good, Ms. Chen." Victor stepped out of the shadows near the second-floor gallery, a gun held casually. At his side, "We had hoped Mrs. Montgomery here would lead us to the real necklace, but it seems the old woman was cleverer than we anticipated." He descended the library's spiral staircase with fluid grace. "Unfortunately, this complicates matters." Eleanor whirled to face him, her face contorted with rage. "You knew? You knew these weren't real? Victor's smile was cold. Of course. We've been tracking these pearls for 3 generations. Did you really think we wouldn't know every detail of them? He reached the bottom of the stairs. The question is, where did dear Beatrice hide the real ones? My mind raced back to every conversation with Beatrice, every detail she'd shared. The key felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. What had she said about her grandmother, about survival at any cost, about protecting history, not just possessing it? And then I remembered something, a throwaway comment during our first meeting about Victorian mourning jewelry. Oh my God, I breathed. They're in plain sight. They always have been. Both Eleanor and Victor turned to stare at me. I pointed to the portrait above the fireplace, the one of Victoria Montgomery in her full Victorian mourning dress. Look at her jewelry, the long black beaded necklace. Jet beads were popular for mourning jewelry because they looked like black pearls. Victor raised his gun slightly. Get to the point, Ms. Chen. I swallowed hard. Jet beads can be replaced. And what better hiding place than a mourning necklace that's been hanging in the same spot for over a century? Nobody would think to question why it never leaves that portrait. Eleanor laughed incredulously. That's ridiculous. That portrait's been there since before I married into this family. But Victor was already moving toward the fireplace, his eyes sharp with interest. The perfect hiding place, he murmured, hidden in history itself. A sound from the hallway made us all freeze. Gran? Nathan's voice called out. Your housekeeper called me, said she was worried. He appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene, his grandmother's body, his mother holding the fake pearls, Victor with his gun, me standing between them all. What the hell is going on? Nathan, Eleanor started, but Victor cut her off with a wave of his gun. Perfect timing, Mr. Montgomery. Perhaps you'd like to help us retrieve your family's true legacy? It seems your wife has figured out where your great-great-grandmother hid the real Romanov pearls. Nathan's eyes darted between all of us, lingering, on Beatrice's still form. The pearls? That's what this is about? That's why you killed her? The raw pain in his voice made my heart ache. Eleanor stepped toward him. Darling, you don't understand. This family, everything they built, it was all based on lies. I'm not even really your father's daughter. I know, Mom, Nathan said quietly. I've known for months. Just like I've known about your meetings with Victor, about your plans for revenge. Shock registered on Eleanor's face. How? Nathan's laugh was bitter. Did you really think Dad went to Shanghai? He's been having you followed ever since he found out about your connection to the Russians. He was trying to protect you, even after everything. Victor's patience visibly snapped. Enough family drama. Ms. Chen, get the portrait down, now. I moved toward the fireplace, my mind working furiously. The key in my pocket wasn't for a display case or a safety deposit box. It was for whatever mechanism Beatrice had built into that frame. As I reached for the portrait, another figure appeared in the doorway. William Montgomery himself, looking older and grayer than when I'd last seen him, but very much not in Shanghai. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Victor, he said calmly. Several armed men in suits appeared behind him. The FBI has been very interested in your organization's attempts to recover lost Russian artifacts. Art Crimes Division takes these things quite seriously. Eleanor's face went chalk white. William? But you're supposed to be... He cut her off with a raised hand. In Shanghai? No, my dear. I've been right here, watching you throw away everything we built together over a genetic test. He turned to Victor. Drop the gun, please, unless you'd like to add murder charges to the art theft and extortion. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Eleanor screamed, a primal sound of rage and grief, and lunged for the portrait. Her fingers caught the frame, pulling it away from the wall. There was a sharp crack as ancient wood splintered. The portrait fell, revealing a small alcove behind it. And there, wrapped in century-old silk, lay a strand of perfect pearls with a sapphire clasp that caught the firelight like a living thing. As federal agents swarmed the room, as Victor was disarmed and Eleanor collapsed in hysterical tears, as Nathan knelt by his grandmother's body, I stared at those pearls. They had caused so much pain, so much betrayal, so much death, first in revolution-torn Russia, and now here in this library. Beatrice had been right. Some legacies were too dangerous to pass on. William approached me quietly. "You know," he said, "Beatrice changed her will last week, left the pearls to the Metropolitan Museum, with a condition that you be appointed their permanent curator. She said something about needing someone who understood both their historical and human cost." He smiled sadly. "I think she'd be glad you solved her last puzzle." I looked at Nathan, still grieving by his grandmother's chair, at Eleanor being led away by agents, at the pearls that had finally emerged from hiding after a century of secrets. Sometimes protecting history meant letting it go, allowing it to become part of a larger story. But as I felt the weight of Nathan's loss, of Eleanor's betrayal, of Beatrice's sacrifice, I wondered, was any piece of history worth such a price? The days following Beatrice's death passed in a blur of police statements, FBI interviews, and newspaper headlines. "Russian imperial treasure recovered in dramatic raid," screamed the New York Times. "Socialite arrested in murder plot over Romanov pearls," declared the Post. Each story more sensational than the last, each one picking apart the Montgomery family's carefully constructed facade. I stood in my office at the Met, staring at the climate-controlled display case that now housed the infamous pearls. They looked different under museum lighting, less mysterious, more artifact than legend. A placard beside them told a carefully worded story. Originally part of the Russian imperial collection, these pearls journeyed to America during the Revolution, recently donated by the Montgomery family. No mention of betrayal, murder, or destroyed lives. "The board is thrilled, you know." My director's voice made me jump. Sandra stood in the doorway, beaming. "Our first major Romanov piece. The publicity alone." She trailed off, noting my expression. "Sorry, I know this is complicated for you." Complicated. Such a small word for such a massive upheaval. Nathan hadn't spoken to me in 3 days, not since the formal unveiling of the collection, where he'd stood stiffly beside me, playing the role of supportive husband while cameras flashed. I'd seen the pain in his eyes every time he looked at the pearls, seeing not their historical significance, but the cascade of tragedy they'd brought to his family. "Ms. Chen?" One of the security guards appeared. "There's someone asking to see you. Says it's about the Romanov collection." My heart skipped, but he quickly added, "It's not Mrs. Montgomery or Mr. Petrov. Says her name is Irina Volkova." The woman waiting in the conservation lab was elderly, but straight-backed, her white hair elegantly coiffed. Her accent was pure, Russian aristocracy. "So," she said as I entered, "you are the one who found my mother's necklace." I stopped short. "Your mother's?" She nodded. "Anya Volkova was my mother, though you knew her as Anya Montgomery." My mind reeled. "But all our records show Anya had no children when she came to America." Irina's laugh was soft but bitter. "No. She left me behind in Russia, a baby hidden with peasant farmers. She promised to return once she'd established herself here. But then she met James Montgomery, and..." She shrugged elegantly. "America offered a better story than a revolutionary's discarded child." I sank into a chair, the implications hitting me. Does Eleanor know that she's not the only one with a claim to question the Montgomery legacy? Irina's eyes sparkled with something like appreciation. Clever girl. No, my dear half-sister doesn't know about me. That would rather complicate her victim's narrative, wouldn't it? Half-sister? I whispered. Irina nodded. Anya wasn't just a revolutionary who fell in love with a Montgomery. She was also in love with my father, her commanding officer. When she fled with the pearls, she was carrying Eleanor's father's child, me. The Montgomerys weren't her only ticket to America. They were her cover story. The room seemed to spin. Why are you telling me this? Irina reached into her handbag, withdrawing a leather portfolio. Because Beatrice knew. She found out the truth years ago, tracked me down in Moscow. We've been corresponding ever since. She wanted someone to know the full story after she was gone. Someone who would understand its true value. Inside the portfolio were letters, photographs, documents, a paper trail of secrets spanning a century. Beatrice was protecting more than just pearls, Irina continued. She was protecting everyone. The Montgomerys from scandal, Eleanor from the truth about her sister, me from those who still hunted Anya's descendants. That's why she chose you. Someone outside the family. Someone who could see the bigger picture. A photo slipped from the stack. Beatrice and Irina in what looked like Paris, dated just last year. They were smiling, comfortable with each other. Family. Victor's people didn't just want the pearls, I realized. They wanted proof of your existence. A living descendant of both the revolution and the aristocracy. Irina's smile was sad. I am a walking political nightmare, my dear. Proof that the lines between revolutionaries and nobility weren't as clear as history pretends. The pearls were never the real treasure, information was. That's what Beatrice understood. Heavy footsteps in the hallway made us both turn. Nathan stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. The FBI called, he said flatly. Mom's talking about everything. Well, almost everything. His eyes fixed on Irina. But I'm guessing there's more to the story? I started to speak, but Irina held up her hand. Mr. Montgomery, she said, rising, I believe it's time you learned about your grandmother's other family. She gestured to the chair beside her. Perhaps you'd like to see some photographs of your aunt's childhood in Moscow? As Nathan sank into the chair, his hands shaking slightly as he reached for the portfolio, I quietly slipped out of the room. They needed this moment without an audience. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. My phone buzzed. A text from William. Eleanor's asking for you. Says there's something you need to know about the night Beatrice died. I stared at the message, remembering Eleanor's face in the firelight, her fingers wrapped around the fake pearls. What more could she possibly have to tell me? But then I thought of Irina's revelation, of a century of secrets finally coming to light. Sometimes the truth wasn't a single revelation, but a series of waves, each one washing away another layer of carefully constructed fiction. Opening my eyes, I looked back through the conservation lab's window. Nathan was crying now, Irina's arm, around his shoulders as she showed him what looked like a child's drawing. The past and present, Russia and America, revolution and aristocracy, all colliding in this moment. Just like Beatrice had planned, I took a deep breath and typed a response to William. Tell her I'm coming. After all, if this story had taught me anything, it was that every secret, no matter how deeply buried, eventually found its way to the surface. And sometimes, just sometimes, the truth could set more than one person free. The Metropolitan Detention Center loomed against the gray Brooklyn sky, a concrete monument to consequences. I sat across from Eleanor in the visitor's room, separated by thick plexiglass. She looked smaller somehow, her designer clothes replaced by prison orange, her perfectly styled hair now limp and graying at the roots. But her eyes, they burned, with the same intensity as ever. I didn't kill her, she said without preamble. Beatrice, I mean. I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. But someone beat me to it. I leaned forward, studying her face for any sign of deception. What do you mean? Eleanor's laugh was hollow. Victor's people were already there when I arrived. They'd posed as a delivery service, gotten past security. By the time I reached the library, she was already dying. My mind raced back to that night, to the teacup on the Persian carpet. But you took credit for it. You let everyone think you'd poisoned her. Why? She shrugged, a gesture made awkward by her handcuffs. Because I wanted to hurt them. William, Nathan, the whole Montgomery facade. Taking credit for Beatrice's death meant they'd have to live with believing I was capable of murder. And now? I asked. Why tell me the truth? Eleanor's facade cracked slightly, showing something that might have been regret. Because Beatrice told me about Irina right before she died. That's what I walked in on, her gasping out the truth about my sister, about my real father, the pearls, the revolution, everything. She used her last breath to shatter what was left of my world. I sat back, processing this. So when you threatened me, I was trying to protect the only thing I had left, the satisfaction of destroying the family myself, she finished. Ironic, isn't it? I finally learned the truth about my origins, only to discover I had a sister who'd been hidden away all this time. A sister who actually has a legitimate claim to everything I thought I was fighting for. A guard approached, signaling our time was almost up. Eleanor leaned forward, her voice urgent. There's something else. Something Beatrice said about a second set of documents, hidden somewhere in the house. Papers that prove what really happened during the revolution. Who actually ordered the theft of the imperial treasures. Victor's people are still looking for them. My curatorial instincts tingled. What kind of documents? Eleanor's eyes darted to the guard, then back to me. Proof that the order came from the top, from Lenin himself. Proof that would rewrite Russian history. Beatrice said she hid them where art meets commerce. I assumed it was another reference to that damn portrait, but... The guard stepped closer. Time's up. Eleanor stood, then hesitated. Victor's organization. They're not done. The pearls were just the beginning. Whatever Beatrice hid, they want it badly enough to kill for. Be careful, Olivia. You might be the curator of more than just jewelry now. I left the detention center with my head spinning. Where art meets commerce. The phrase tugged at something in my memory. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through photos I'd taken of Beatrice's library. The portrait, the books, I stopped, zooming in on a detail in the background. There, half hidden behind a chair. A vintage Cartier advertising poster from the 1920s, featuring their New York store. Oh my God, I whispered. The clasp on the pearl necklace, the one I'd identified as Cartier's work. What if it wasn't just about the craftsmanship? What if Beatrice's grandmother had chosen Cartier for a reason? I called Nathan immediately. The New York Cartier store. When was it built? I could hear him shuffling papers. 1917, I think. Right before everything happened in Russia. Why? Because I think I know where Beatrice hid those documents. The original Cartier building. It's a landmark now, right? Still has all its original architectural features? Nathan's voice sharpened with interest, including the original safe deposit boxes. Dad mentioned once that our families had one there since the store opened. Box number, hold on. More shuffling. Box 1917. I was already hailing a cab. Meet me there. And Nathan? Don't tell anyone. Where you're going. Not even your father. As I gave the driver the address, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A photo appeared. The same Cartier poster I'd just been looking at in Beatrice's library, but this one was clearly taken recently. Within the last few minutes, someone had been watching me at the prison, someone who was now racing me to Fifth Avenue. The cab fought through midtown traffic as I tried calling Irina. No answer. I remembered her words about being a walking political nightmare, about information being the real treasure. What if the documents proved more than just Lenin's involvement? What if they proved collaboration between the aristocracy and the revolutionaries? A conspiracy that would undermine not just history but current power structures? My phone buzzed again. This time it was William. FBI surveillance just spotted Victor entering Manhattan. He's heading toward Fifth Avenue. Another buzz. Nathan. Dad knows about the safe deposit box. Says we need to wait for the FBI before we open it. And finally, Irina. Don't trust anyone. The pearls were never the target. They were just the key. The key. I reached into my pocket, touching Beatrice's key. She'd said it wasn't for the display case. What if it wasn't for the house at all? What if all this time it had been for something else? Something hidden in plain sight, in a building where art quite literally met commerce. The cab turned onto Fifth Avenue. Through the windshield, I could see the historic Cartier building rising like a limestone fortress. A familiar Mercedes was parked out front, Eleanor's car, now apparently being used by Victor's people. And there, stepping out of a town car, was Nathan, looking up at the building with an expression I couldn't quite read. As I paid the driver, a memory surfaced, Beatrice's voice, talking about her grandmother. She didn't just smuggle out the necklace. She had help from within the Bolshevik ranks. Now, nearly a century later, I was about to find out exactly what kind of help and what it had cost. The real question was, who would reach those documents first, and what would they do with the truth they contained? I straightened my shoulders and walked toward the building, feeling the weight of history with every step. Sometimes the most valuable things in a jewelry store aren't the gems, they're the secrets locked away in their vaults. And I was about to unlock one that had been waiting 100 years to be found. The Cartier boutique's interior was a study in old-world luxury. Gleaming display cases, marble floors, and elaborate crown molding that had witnessed nearly a century of wealth-changing hands. The security guard eyed my Met ID badge skeptically. The vault access is by appointment only, Ms. Chen. Behind him, Nathan appeared, his Harvard professor credentials already out. She's with me. Montgomery family. Box 1917. The name still carried weight, even with recent scandals. The guard made a call, speaking in hushed tones. While we waited, I scanned the store. A couple browsed engagement rings, a woman had her watch appraised, and near the vintage collection display, a man in a well-cut suit studied his phone with too much intensity to be casual. One of Victor's people, no doubt. "Follow me, please," the guard said finally. We descended a marble staircase to the basement level, where the original vault stood like a steel cathedral. Another guard joined us, this one armed. Standard procedure. But it made me nervous. If Victor's people made a move, innocent bystanders could get hurt. "Something's wrong," Nathan whispered, as we waited for them to verify our credentials again. "This feels too easy." He was right. Victor's man upstairs hadn't even tried to stop us. Almost as if they want us to open it, I realized. They're letting us do the hard part. The vault door swung open with a pneumatic hiss. Row upon row of safe deposit boxes lined the walls, their brass numbers gleaming under fluorescent lights. Box 1917 was at eye level, unassuming except for its number. I reached for Beatrice's key, but Nathan caught my wrist. "Wait, look at the lock." I peered closer, tiny scratches around the keyhole, recent ones. Someone's tried to open it already. Nathan nodded grimly, but they failed, which means, "This isn't the right key," I finished. "Beatrice's key is for something else." "But what? Why send us here if—" The answer hit me like a physical blow. The advertising poster in her library. It hadn't been the current Cartier store she was hinting at. It was the original one from 1917, the building that had stood here before this one. "Nathan, when was this building renovated? The vault, specifically?" He frowned, thinking. 1939, I think. Dad mentioned it once. They relocated everything from the original. His eyes widened as he reached the same conclusion. The original vault. Parts of it are still in the basement of the old service entrance. They sealed it off during renovation, but it's still there. I turned to the guards. We need access to the original vault section. It's an emergency. They exchanged looks. That area's been sealed for decades. It's not up to code. Nathan pulled out his phone. I'm calling my father. He's on the landmark. Preservation board. He can authorize. A commotion upstairs cut him off. Shouts. A woman's scream. The sound of breaking glass. Nobody move! A voice commanded. Through the vault's open door, we could hear multiple sets of footsteps on the marble staircase. Victor's people were done waiting. The service corridor, one guard whispered urgently, drawing his weapon. Behind the file cabinet. It connects. To the old vault section. He tossed me a ring of keys. Third door on the left. Go. We'll hold them here. Nathan and I slipped through a hidden panel just as the first armed men reached the vault entrance. The service corridor was narrow, lit only by emergency lights. We ran past old storage rooms, our footsteps echoing. Behind us, gunshots rang. Out, silenced, but still terrifying. The third door was solid steel, its hinges thick with rust. The keys shook in my hands as I tried them one by one. Hurry, Nathan urged. They'll figure out where we went. Finally, a key turned. The door groaned open, revealing a circular room with an older vault door. This one had no electronic keypad, just an ancient mechanical lock. Beatrice's key, Nathan said. Try it. The key slid in smoothly, as if it had been waiting all these years for this moment. The mechanism clicked, and the door swung open with surprising ease. Inside, the air was stale, thick with decades of silence. And there, in a corner, stood a small safe. Not a safe deposit box, but an actual antique safe. Look, I pointed. The safe's brand name. Romanov Steelworks, St. Petersburg, 1905. Nathan let out a low whistle. A Russian safe in an American vault, hidden during renovation when everyone was focused on moving the deposit boxes. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. We were out of time. I inserted Beatrice's key into the safe's lock. Another perfect fit. Inside lay a leather portfolio, its pages yellow with age. But it wasn't just documents inside. Photographs spilled out, along with what looked like military orders signed by Lenin himself. And there, wrapped in silk, was a second key. Smaller, more ornate, with a familiar sapphire set into its handle. The clasp, I gasped. The necklace clasp isn't just decorative, it's a key too. Nathan grabbed the portfolio. We need to go. Now. But as we turned to leave, a voice stopped us. I'm afraid it's too late for that. Victor stood in the doorway, gun raised. Behind him, 2 more armed men blocked our escape. The portfolio, please, he said calmly. And the key. My employers have waited a long time to recover these particular items. Nathan stepped in front of me. Your employers? You mean the Russian government? Victor's laugh was cold. Government? No. There are older powers than governments, Mr. Montgomery. Powers that have been waiting since the revolution to reclaim what's theirs. The white Russian loyalists, I realized. They never gave up, did they? They've been searching for proof of collaboration between Lenin and the aristocracy. Victor's smile was sharp. Proof that would destroy both the modern Russian government's legitimacy and the claims of any surviving Romanov heirs. Now, the portfolio. A new voice joined the standoff. I'm afraid we can't let that happen. William Montgomery emerged from the shadows of the corridor, flanked by FBI agents with raised weapons. The Bureau's been tracking your organization. For years. We just needed you to lead us to your employers. Victor's men wavered, but he remained calm. You think this is over? There will be others. The truth cannot stay buried forever. William's voice was steel. No, it can't. That's why the documents are going to the National Archives, where historians can study them properly. No more secrets. No more hiding history in vaults. As the FBI took Victor and his men into custody, I looked at the portfolio in Nathan's hands, at the key that would unlock the final secret hidden in the pearl necklace's clasp. Some truths were meant to be found, meant to reshape our understanding of the past. But others, like the real reason Beatrice had chosen me as her successor, would remain personal treasures, kept safe in the vault of memory. 3 months later, I stood in the Met's conservation lab, holding the pearl necklace under a magnifying lamp. The FBI had finally released it back to the museum after completing their investigation. Irina sat beside me, her elegant fingers hovering over the sapphire clasp. "Are you sure you want to know?" she asked softly. "Some secrets are meant to stay buried." But we both knew that wasn't true. Secrets had nearly destroyed the Montgomery family. They had cost Beatrice her life, sent Eleanor to prison, and exposed a century-old conspiracy that had rewritten Russian history books. The documents found in the Cartier vault had revealed an intricate web of collaboration between Lenin's inner circle and aristocratic families, each playing both sides of the revolution. "Do it," Nathan said from the doorway. He'd been quiet lately, processing everything. The truth about his family's origins, Eleanor's betrayal, the weight of Beatrice's final gift. Now he watched as I inserted the ornate key we'd found in the Russian safe into the nearly invisible seam of the sapphire clasp. The mechanism clicked softly, and the clasp split open like a book. Inside was a tiny compartment containing a folded piece of paper and something else. A small gold ring, set with a ruby. Irina's breath caught. That's my father's ring, the one he gave my mother before she fled." My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was faded but clear. Anya's last letter to her daughter, never delivered. "My dearest Irina," I read aloud. "If you are reading this, then Beatrice has succeeded where I failed. She promised to find you, to protect you when I could not. The Montgomerys gave me a new life, but my greatest shame was abandoning you for it." Nathan moved closer as I continued reading. "The ring was your father's proof of love, not just for me, but for the cause we both believed in. He sacrificed everything to help me escape, knowing he would likely face execution for betraying the revolution. The pearls bought my freedom, but this ring carries the real treasure, proof of love stronger than loyalty to any regime." Irina wiped tears from her eyes. "All these years, I thought she'd forgotten me, that I meant nothing compared to her new American life." I handed her the ring, watching as she slipped it onto her finger. A perfect fit, like it had been waiting all these years to return to its rightful owner. "There's more," Nathan said, pointing to another fold in the paper. The next section was written in a different hand, Beatrice's. "My dear Olivia," it began. I looked up in surprise. She'd written this for me. "By now you know why I chose you. Not just for your expertise, but for your heart. You understand that history isn't just dates and artifacts. It's the human stories behind them." I read on, my voice growing stronger. "The pearls were never the real inheritance. They were just the key to unlocking the truth. The real treasure is the power to choose what to do with that truth. Eleanor chose revenge. Victor chose power. But you, my dear, chose understanding. That's why I trust you to be the guardian of this legacy." William appeared in the lab doorway, looking older but somehow lighter since the truth had come out. "The FBI finished interviewing Eleanor this morning," he said quietly. "She's agreed to testify against Victor's organization in exchange for a reduced sentence, and—" he hesitated, looking at Irina. "She'd like to meet her sister, properly this time." Irina twisted her father's ring thoughtfully. "Perhaps it's time." We are family, after all, no matter how complicated that family might be. Nathan took her hand, squeezing it gently. Dad and I are going to visit Mom this weekend. Would you like to come with us? As they discussed arrangements, I turned, back to the necklace. Under the magnifying lamp, I could see tiny scratches inside the clasp, marks from all the times it had been opened and closed, hiding and protecting its secrets through revolution, exile, and reinvention. My phone buzzed with a text from Sandra, my director. The Times wants to do a feature on the new Romanov exhibition. They're particularly interested in the family story behind the pearls. How do you want to handle it? I looked at Nathan and Irina, heads bent together as they examined their father's ring, at William watching his son with quiet pride. Tell them the truth, I texted back. But not just about the pearls. Tell them about the people, the choices they made, the prices they paid, the love that survived revolution and betrayal. Tell them that sometimes the most precious heirlooms aren't the ones we can put in display cases. Later that evening, as we gathered in the Montgomery townhouse, now being converted into a historical trust, I watched Nathan hang the restored portrait of Victoria Montgomery. The pearls in the painting were just paint and canvas, but they shimmered with renewed meaning. Below it, we placed a new plaque that read, "In memory of Beatrice Montgomery, who understood that true heritage lives not in objects, but in the stories we choose to tell." Irina approached me, her father's ring catching the light. You know, she said thoughtfully. In Russian, we have a saying, the truth has 3 corners. One we see, one others see, and one that only time reveals. She smiled, touching the frame of her grandmother's portrait. Beatrice understood that. That's why she chose you, someone who could see all 3 corners and still find beauty in the whole picture. As if in response, the setting sun streamed through the library windows, catching the sapphire in the clasp of the pearl necklace now displayed, in its museum-grade case. For a moment, it seemed to glow with an inner light, like a beacon guiding us from past to present, from secrets to truth, from broken pieces to something whole and new. The necklace would go on display tomorrow, telling its story to thousands of visitors. But here, in this room, with this unlikely family brought together by its mysteries, it had already served its greatest purpose. It had shown us that sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't what we keep locked away, but what we finally set free. 6 months after the Romanov exhibition opened, I received a curious package at my Met office. No return address, just an elegant handwritten label marked Urgent Personal. Inside was a tarnished silver cigarette case with a note. The pearls weren't the only things that escaped the revolution. Come alone to the Russian tea room tonight. 8 p.m. A friend of Anya's, I should have called the FBI immediately. After everything that had happened with Victor's organization, any mysterious communication about the revolution should have raised red flags. But something about the cigarette case caught my professional eye. The workmanship was unmistakably Fabergé, but not in any style I'd ever seen cataloged. You're not actually going, are you? Nathan asked when I called him. Since the truth about his family had come out, he'd taken a sabbatical from teaching, focusing instead on writing a book about his great-grandmother's role in the revolution. After everything that happened with the pearls. That's exactly why I have to go, I replied, studying the cigarette case under my desk lamp. Look, I'll text you the address. If you don't hear from me by 8:30, call William. Since his wife's imprisonment, William Montgomery had maintained his FBI contacts, keeping a protective eye on both his family and the emerging details of the revolution's hidden history. The Russian tea room was quiet for a Thursday night, its red and gold decor gleaming under vintage chandeliers. A hostess led me to a private booth in the back, where an elderly man sat nursing a glass of vodka. His face was deeply lined, but his eyes were sharp and alert. "Ah, Ms. Chen," he smiled, standing to greet me. or should I say, the guardian, of the Romanov pearls? You have me at a disadvantage, I said, sliding into the booth. He waved away my comment. Names are dangerous things, as your mother-in-law discovered. Let's just say I knew Anya's revolutionary friend, the one who helped her escape. He was my grandfather. My heart skipped a beat. Irina's father? The old man's smile turned sad. The same, though he never knew his daughter survived. The Bolsheviks executed him 3 months after Anya fled, officially for helping her escape, but really because he knew too much about the collaboration between Lenin's inner circle and the aristocracy. He gestured to the cigarette case I'd brought. That was his. A gift from the last Tsarina herself, payment for services rendered before the revolution. You see, my grandfather wasn't just any revolutionary. He was a double agent, playing both sides. The pearls weren't payment for Anya's escape. They were payment for something far more valuable. A waiter appeared with caviar and more vodka. The old man waited until we were alone again before continuing. Inside that cigarette case is a hidden compartment. Much like your pearl necklace's clasp, it requires a specific key. A key that, until recently, was thought lost forever. I examined the case more carefully, noticing tiny scratches around what looked like a decorative silver button. The ruby ring, I breathed. The one in the clasp. It's not just a ring, is it? He nodded approvingly. Now you understand. That ring is the key to unlocking the last and greatest secret of the revolution, the true fate of the Romanov fortune. But those records were destroyed, I protested. The Bolsheviks burned everything when they seized power. The old man's laugh was bitter. They burned what they wanted people to find. The real records, the secret accounts, the foreign holdings, the names of aristocrats who collaborated. Those were hidden. My grandfather made sure of that before he died. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The cigarette case contains a cipher key. Combined with documents in certain Swiss bank vaults, it would reveal the location of over $50 billion in Romanov assets. Assets that technically belong to the surviving heirs, including your sister-in-law, Irina. My mind raced with the implications. That's why Victor's organization was really after the pearls. They knew about the ring, about the cipher. The old man nodded. But they didn't know about the cigarette case. My grandfather split the secret into 3 parts: the ring, the case, and the bank documents. Only by bringing them together can the fortune be found. Why tell me this? Why not? Go directly to Irina? His expression darkened. Because Victor's people are watching her. They know who she is now. But you're the unexpected variable. The outsider who proved worthy of Beatrice's trust. And now I'm trusting you too. He stood abruptly. Don't try to find me. When the time is right, I'll contact you again. Until then, keep the case safe. And Ms. Chen? He paused, looking suddenly vulnerable. Tell Irina. Tell her that her father loved her until his last breath. The proof is in his final letter, hidden in that case. After he left, I sat staring at the cigarette case, my food untouched. My phone buzzed, a text from Nathan. Everything okay? Before I could respond, another message came through from an unknown number. A photo of me entering the restaurant, followed by 3 words. We're watching too. I quickly slipped the cigarette case into my bag, leaving cash on the table. Outside, the New York night was alive with traffic and pedestrians, any of whom could be surveillance. My phone buzzed again. William this time. Eleanor's requesting another meeting. Says she has information about a Fabergé cigarette case. Don't respond until we talk. Walking quickly toward the subway, I felt the weight of the case in my bag. One secret had led to another, each revelation spawning new mysteries. The pearls had been just the beginning. a glittering trail of breadcrumbs leading to an even bigger historical conspiracy. A black car pulled up alongside me, its window rolling down smoothly. Inside sat Irina, her father's ruby ring glinting on her finger. "Get in," she said calmly. "We need to talk about the inheritance my father really left me." As I slid into the car, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in a storefront window. Two women bound together by secrets old and new, racing against time and shadowy organizations to uncover a truth that could reshape history yet again. The car pulled away from the curb, carrying us deeper into the labyrinth of revolutionary secrets and family legacies. Behind us, a figure emerged from the shadows, speaking quietly into a phone. "The Guardian has made contact. The game begins again." The night swallowed us whole, as it had swallowed Anya and her secrets a century before, leaving only questions in its wake. And so here we are, back where I began. Christmas Eve, water dripping from my face, Eleanor's voice cutting through the stunned silence. But this time, the pearls around my neck aren't what everyone's staring at. It's the Fabergé cigarette case in my hands, its hidden compartment finally open, revealing a truth that would change everything. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of secret meetings and midnight revelations. Eleanor's prison confession about the cigarette case had led to an unlikely alliance. She and Irina, the sisters separated by revolution and deception, had worked together from opposite sides of the prison glass to piece together their father's final message. The pearls were never the real treasure, Eleanor had said, her prison uniform a stark contrast to Irina's elegant suit as they sat together in the visiting room. They were just pretty bait, meant to keep everyone looking in the wrong direction while the real fortune stayed hidden. William had put his FBI connections to work, uncovering a web of Swiss bank accounts and hidden vaults. Nathan had pored over his great-grandmother's diaries, finding coded references to something called the Phoenix Protocol, apparently the revolution's secret contingency plan for preserving aristocratic wealth under the guise of seizing it. But it was the old man's murder that forced our hand. They found him in his apartment, posed with an empty teacup beside him, a cruel echo of Beatrice's death. Victor's organization was sending a message. They were done waiting. Which brings us to tonight, to the Montgomery townhouse's annual Christmas Eve gathering. To Eleanor, temporarily released under FBI supervision to attend what everyone thought was a family reconciliation. To the moment she threw her water in my face, creating the perfect distraction while Irina secretly passed me her father's ruby ring. Now, as the water drips onto my silk dress, I hold up the cigarette case for everyone to see. "This isn't about pearls anymore," I announce, my voice carrying through the shocked silence. "It's about the truth, about who really won the revolution, and what they won." The hidden compartment in the case contains a single microfilm, preserved for over a century. As Nathan sets up the antique projector we'd prepared, I continue. Anya didn't just smuggle out jewels. She smuggled out proof of a conspiracy so deep it would rewrite history. The first image flickers onto the library wall, a document bearing Lenin's signature alongside those of several aristocratic families. The revolution wasn't a complete overthrow, I explain. It was also a transfer of power, agreed upon by both sides. Certain families would appear to lose everything, while secretly preserving their wealth through a network of foreign accounts and hidden assets. Eleanor stands, her FBI handlers tensing. "Our father," she says, looking at Irina, "wasn't executed for helping Anya escape. He was killed because he kept proof of the agreement, proof that the Soviet state was built on a foundation of compromise with the very people it claimed to overthrow." More images flash across the wall, bank records, correspondence, photographs, of meetings between revolutionaries and aristocrats. The gathered crowd murmurs in shock. Among them are journalists we'd invited, historians, and representatives from 3 governments. Victor's organization wasn't trying to reclaim lost treasures, Irina adds, standing beside her sister. They were trying to keep this evidence buried, because even now, a century later, it could destabilize power structures built on the myth of a complete revolutionary break with the past. William steps forward, FBI badge glinting. Which is why, as of tonight, all of these records are being made public. No more secrets, no more hiding history. He nods to his agents, who begin distributing documents to the journalists. Eleanor reaches for my hand, surprising everyone, including me. I threw water on you once for wearing pearls you didn't deserve, she says loudly. I was wrong. You deserved them more than any of us, because you understood what Beatrice knew, that preserving history means telling all of it, not just the pretty parts. The cigarette case feels lighter now, its secrets finally aired. Nathan wraps an arm around my shoulders as reporters begin shouting questions. Outside, snow starts to fall, covering the city that had harbored these secrets for so long. Later that night, after the press conferences and formal statements, our unlikely family gathers in the library. Eleanor and Irina sit together, examining their father's ring. William and Nathan discuss plans for a historical foundation to manage the newly public records. And I stand by the window, watching the snow erase the boundaries between past and present. The pearls still rest in their museum display, their own secrets finally at peace. But their legacy lives on in the choices we made, to expose truth rather than bury it, to build bridges rather than walls, to let history breathe free after a century of confinement. What happens now? Nathan asks, joining me at the window. I touch the empty cigarette case in my pocket, thinking of all the stories yet to be told, all the histories yet to be rewritten. Now, I smile, we become curators of truth instead of keepers of secrets. And maybe that's the greatest inheritance Beatrice could have left us. Outside, the snow continues to fall, covering everything in a clean white blanket. Tomorrow, the world will wake to headlines about revolutionary conspiracies and hidden fortunes. Power structures will shake, histories will be rewritten, and somewhere in Russia, old guards will finally fall. But tonight, in this room, we're just a family, finding its way forward through the shadows of the past. Eleanor and Irina laugh at some shared joke, their father's spirit living on in their unexpected bond. William raises a toast to Beatrice's memory. And I lean against my husband, finally understanding what his grandmother meant about the real value of inheritance. Some treasures are meant to be displayed behind glass, admired but untouched. Others are meant to be set free, to change the world with their truth. In the end, the real revolution wasn't fought with pearls or documents or secret codes. It was fought with choices, the choice to trust, to forgive, to reveal rather than conceal. And as the snow erases the old year's footprints, we prepare to step into a new chapter. Our family rebuilt not on secrets, but on the shared understanding that sometimes the greatest heritage we can pass on is the courage to let truth shine, whatever shadows it might cast. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.